She didn't just cheat. She planned her escape. While I worked 80-hour weeks, she was sneaking around with a high-profile lawyer, probably the same one who would handle our divorce. And when she wasn't with him, she was with a hedge fund executive who thought his money made him untouchable. I almost let it destroy me, almost ended everything. But then I made a different choice. She thought she had won. She had no idea what was coming. I worked as a financial analyst for a major investment firm in Los Angeles. The job was demanding, but it paid well enough for us to live comfortably. Loren, on the other hand, was involved in charity work, always running fundraisers, attending galas, or networking with influential people. We had different worlds, but I thought we had a strong bond. Our anniversary dinner was supposed to be a celebration, but something about Loren felt distant. She was smiling, laughing, but I could tell her mind was elsewhere. As we sat at an elegant rooftop restaurant overlooking the city, her phone vibrated. She glanced at it quickly before flipping it face down. "Work stuff?" I asked. She nodded. "Yeah, just event planning. Nothing urgent." I didn't think much of it at the time. The next day at work, everything went to hell. One of our firm's biggest clients had accused me of mishandling their portfolio, and now an internal review was being launched. If I couldn't prove that I had followed procedure, my career was at risk. By the time I got home, exhausted and stressed, Loren wasn't there. A quick glance at our bank account showed a $500 charge to a hotel I didn't recognize. My stomach twisted. That weekend, I met up with my sister Megan and my old college friend Dan, who now worked as a private investigator. Over dinner, I casually mentioned the charge on the bank statement, half expecting them to tell me it was nothing. Dan raised an eyebrow. "Strange. I think I saw Loren leaving the Biltmore Hotel last week." I forced a chuckle. Must have been someone else. That night, I noticed something new. Loren took her phone and locked herself in the bathroom, the water running as she whispered into the receiver. When I knocked, she went silent. Moments later, she came out, her expression annoyed. "Who are you talking to?" I asked. She sighed, rolling her eyes. "Why do you always have to control everything?" And just like that, she walked away, leaving me standing there with a sinking feeling in my gut. There was a time when coming home felt like a relief. A time when I'd open the door, and Loren would greet me with a smile, maybe a drink in her hand, and ask me about my day. That time was gone. This week had been a disaster, and I was drowning in it. At work, my bosses had made it clear that they weren't happy. The firm was facing scrutiny because of an investment deal gone wrong, and somehow, I had become the scapegoat. Clients were furious, numbers weren't adding up, and my name was being whispered in conference rooms like I was already gone. My manager, Charles, called me into his office that afternoon. "Brian," he said, rubbing his temples, "the higher-ups are looking for someone to blame. You need to be careful." I clenched my fists under the desk. "I didn't do anything wrong." He sighed. "Doesn't matter. Perception is everything." By the time I got home, my head was pounding. I needed comfort, reassurance, anything to remind me that my life wasn't completely falling apart. But Loren wasn't there. At first, I thought maybe she was out shopping or with friends. But when I checked my phone, I saw that she had sent a short, impersonal text. "Working late. Don't wait up." I stared at the message for a long time before tossing my phone onto the couch. That night, I barely slept, and the next morning, things only got worse. Before heading to work, I checked our joint bank account, something I rarely did. What I saw made my stomach drop. A charge for $500 at the Biltmore Hotel, the same hotel where Dan had mentioned seeing her. I told myself it had to be something innocent, maybe a charity event, maybe a work meeting. But why hadn't she mentioned it? That weekend, we met up with Megan and Dan for dinner. I wanted to act normal, pretend that everything was fine, but I couldn't shake the unease gnawing at me. Halfway through the meal, Dan casually asked, "Hey, did Loren ever mention the Biltmore to you?" I forced a laugh. "No, why?" He hesitated. "I saw her leaving there last week." Loren barely reacted. She didn't even flinch, just took another sip of wine, as if she hadn't heard him. That night, I heard her whispering on the phone. The bathroom door was closed, the water was running, but her voice was still audible through the noise. "I can't talk right now," she said in a hushed tone. "He's home." I stood outside the door, my hands clenched into fists. I could have confronted her right then, could have demanded answers, but I didn't. Instead, I lay awake in bed, staring at the ceiling, wondering just how much of my marriage was a lie. There were moments when I caught myself staring at my own reflection, wondering when things had started to spiral. I used to be someone people admired, someone in control, but now, I felt like a man standing on a frozen lake, listening to the ice crack beneath his feet. And the worst part? I had no idea how deep the water was below me. The morning started with another meeting I hadn't asked for. I was barely through my first cup of coffee when Charles, my manager, called me into his office. His expression told me everything before he even spoke. "Brian, we have a problem." I sank into the chair across from his desk. "Let me guess. Another anonymous concern about my accounts?" He hesitated before nodding. "Not just one. There have been multiple irregularities flagged under your name." I let out a sharp exhale, leaning forward. "Charles, I didn't touch those numbers. Someone is screwing with me." He tapped his fingers against the desk. "Look, I've known you for years, but the firm isn't going to care about your word. They care about optics. There's a review board meeting next week, and if you can't explain this..." I ran a hand down my face. "If I lost this job, I lost everything." Charles lowered his voice. "Who would want to do this to you?" That was the question, wasn't it? I had no enemies in the office, or at least I hadn't thought I did. But suddenly, the walls felt like they were closing in. And the worst part? I had no support, no one to turn to, not even Lorraine. I got home late, my body heavy with exhaustion. Lorraine was sitting on the couch, legs curled under her, a glass of red wine in her hand. The TV was on, but she wasn't watching it. She was scrolling through her phone, perfectly content, as if the world wasn't crashing down around us. "Long day?" she asked, her voice casual. I dropped my bag by the door. "You could say that." She didn't look up. Something inside me twisted. There was a time when she would have noticed if something was wrong. She would have pulled me into a hug, told me everything would be okay. That time was long gone. "We need to talk," I said finally. Lorraine exhaled as if I'd just asked her to do something exhausting. "What now, Brian?" My jaw clenched. "Are you happy?" That caught her off guard. She blinked, setting her phone down. "What kind of question is that?" "I don't know." I shrugged. "It's an honest one." She studied me, then shook her head. "I think you're just stressed from work. Maybe you should take a break." I let out a dry laugh. "A break? I might not even have a job soon." No reaction. She took another sip of wine, her expression unreadable. "You don't care, do you?" I said quietly. Finally, she looked at me. "Brian, I don't know what you want me to say." I stared at her for a long moment. It wasn't just distance. It was something else, something worse. Before I could say anything else, my phone buzzed. I pulled it out and saw a message from Dan. "Hey, weird question. Has Lorraine been acting different?" My fingers hovered over the screen. I typed back, "Why?" There was a long pause before he responded. "Saw her at the Biltmore with some guy." 2 days later, someone else saw her, at a different hotel, with someone else. The words knocked the breath out of me. Lorraine stood up and stretched, letting out a soft yawn. "I'm going to take a shower." She disappeared down the hall. I sat there, my heart pounding against my ribs. 2 different men? Not just one. I didn't even realize I had moved until I was standing in front of the coffee table, staring down at her phone. The screen was dark. I reached for it, my fingers shaking slightly. I pressed the home button. Locked. My stomach dropped. She never locked her phone before. I tried again, but the screen didn't budge. She had set a passcode. A cold realization settled over me. Whatever was happening, she didn't want me to find out. There was a time when I trusted Lorraine without question, when the idea of doubting her felt ridiculous. That time was gone. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping my coffee, my mind replaying Dan's message over and over again. Saw her at the Biltmore with some guy. 2 days later, someone else saw her at a different hotel, with someone else. I wanted to believe there was some logical explanation. Maybe it really was work-related. Maybe it was all a misunderstanding. But then why did it feel like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring down into something dark and bottomless? Lorraine walked into the kitchen, her silk robe tied loosely around her waist, her hair still damp from the shower. She looked relaxed, carefree. She had no idea that I knew. "Morning," she said casually, grabbing a mug from the cabinet. "Morning," I muttered. She sat across from me, scrolling through her phone as she took slow sips of coffee. I studied her carefully. She looked normal, not like someone who had just spent the night lying to her husband. But that was the problem, wasn't it? Loren was a master at deception. I was thinking we could have dinner tonight, I said, keeping my voice light. Just us. She barely looked up. I can't. Late board meeting. I gripped my coffee cup tighter. Another one? She sighed, finally meeting my gaze. Brian, what is this about? I hesitated. I wanted to confront her right then and there. I wanted to throw Dan's message in her face, demand an explanation. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. Nothing, I said, forcing a smile. Just wanted to spend time with my wife. She held my gaze for a second longer, then went back to her phone. That was all the confirmation I needed. Something was very, very wrong. When I got to work, things only got worse. Charles was waiting for me at my desk, his arms crossed. Brian, we need to talk. I let out a slow breath. This about the audit? He nodded. The firm wants you to take a leave of absence. My stomach dropped. What? You can't be serious. Look, man, this is coming from the top. They think it'll be better for optics while they sort everything out. Optics? I let out a bitter laugh. I didn't do anything wrong. Charles didn't argue. He didn't have to. The decision had already been made. I was being pushed out. And just like that, another part of my life was slipping through my fingers. That night, I sat in my office, staring at my laptop screen, my mind racing. Loren wasn't home yet. I opened our joint bank account and started combing through the transactions. Most of them were normal, groceries, gas, online shopping. But then I saw it. A $700 withdrawal from an ATM across town. A $400 charge to an upscale wine bar I'd never been to. And then the biggest one. A $1,500 payment to a name I didn't recognize. I clicked on the details, my pulse pounding. The money had been transferred directly from Lauren's private savings. Whatever this was, she was hiding it. I closed the laptop and leaned back, running a hand down my face. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I was done ignoring the questions. I had spent weeks convincing myself I was overthinking, that all the late nights, the changes in her behavior, the lies I told myself to keep going, it was just stress, that I was imagining things. But tonight, I ran out of excuses. Loren left the house at 8 p.m., saying she was meeting a donor for dinner. She looked stunning, too stunning for a work meeting. The red dress she wore clung to her in a way that made my stomach turn. I told myself not to read into it. But when she grabbed her keys and walked out without even saying goodbye, something inside me knew. I waited 15 minutes before checking our bank account. There was another charge. The Fairmont Hotel, a place she had no reason to be. I grabbed my jacket and left. By the time I got downtown, the transaction had already been processed. That meant she was there. I parked across the street, heart pounding in my chest. People walked in and out of the hotel, some alone, some in pairs. And then I saw her. Loren walked through the glass doors, her hand resting lightly on the arm of a man I had never seen before. He was tall, confident, dressed in an expensive suit. She was laughing at something he said, tilting her head the way she used to with me. I didn't need to follow them inside. I didn't need to see anything else. I already knew. I sat in my car for over an hour, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles ached. My entire body felt numb. I could feel the weight of something breaking inside me, something that I wasn't sure could ever be put back together. By the time I made it home, the house felt different, like it wasn't mine anymore. I poured myself a drink, then another. I sat in silence, staring at nothing, waiting for the alcohol to take the edge off. But it didn't. Nothing could. At some point, I found myself in the bedroom, standing in front of the closet. My fingers traced along the fabric of her dresses, the scent of her perfume still clinging to them. For a second, I imagined never waking up again, just slipping into the darkness and letting it all go. But then I saw it. A small slip of paper sticking out of her coat pocket. I pulled it out with shaking hands. A boarding pass. She had booked a flight to Chicago, a place she had no reason to go. And the departure date? The following weekend. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was planning to leave. That was the moment something inside me snapped. I wasn't going to let this destroy me. I wasn't going to be her fool. She wanted to start a new life? Fine. But first, I was going to burn this one to the ground. I didn't sleep. I just sat there in the living room, staring at nothing, feeling like I wasn't even inside my own body anymore. The whiskey bottle sat on the table in front of me, still full. I thought drinking might help, might numb something, but I didn't even have the energy for that. My brain wouldn't stop replaying last night. The hotel. The way she looked at that guy. The way she came home and acted like nothing happened. Like I didn't exist. At some point, I opened my laptop and started looking up divorce lawyers. Just reading through the names made me feel sick. I tried to imagine sitting in some office, explaining how my wife had been screwing other men behind my back. How she had smiled at me every day like she wasn't living a double life. I closed the laptop. I couldn't do it. Not yet. The sun was already coming up when I heard Loren moving around upstairs. I pushed myself off the couch, feeling like I was made of stone. My whole body was heavy. Every step up the stairs felt like it took an hour. When I reached our bedroom, the door was open just a little. I could see her sitting on the edge of the bed, stretching, completely at peace. She looked so normal, like she wasn't a liar, like she wasn't a cheater, like she hadn't burned our entire life to the ground. Something inside me snapped. Are you cheating on me? My voice sounded different. Not angry, not broken, just hollow. Loren didn't even look surprised. She blinked at me, then did something I'll never forget. She laughed. Seriously, Brian, she said, shaking her head like I was a child who just asked a dumb question. I felt my fingers curl into fists. I want an answer. She sighed and ran a hand through her hair. You already know. That was it. No apology. No fake excuses. No attempt to even soften the blow. Just you already know. I don't even remember leaving the house. 1 second I was standing there, staring at her, and the next I was outside, walking. Just walking. I passed the diner where we used to have breakfast on Sundays. The movie theater where we had our first date. The park where I once told her I wanted to spend the rest of my life with her. It was all fake. At some point, I ended up at the train tracks. I stood there, staring at the rails, feeling nothing. Just nothing. It would be easy. 1 step forward, 1 second of weightlessness, and then nothing. I stepped closer. Then, out of nowhere, I remembered something my dad told me when I was a kid. You don't quit. Not ever. If someone knocks you down, you get up swinging. I don't know why that memory hit me at that exact second, but it did. I took a deep breath. I wasn't going to quit. If Loren thought she could just walk all over me, lie to me, humiliate me, she had no idea what was coming. I turned around and walked back home. I had work to do. Loren thought she had won. That was her first mistake. I let her believe it. Let her think I was too broken, too weak to fight back. I didn't ask where she was going at night. Didn't check her phone. Didn't question the fake meetings or the late-night showers. And, just like that, she got comfortable. She started being careless. She left her phone on the counter while making coffee. She smiled to herself when she thought I wasn't looking. She even kissed me goodbye before leaving the house, like she wasn't about to go meet another man. That was fine. I wanted her to feel safe. I wanted her to think I was defeated, because the moment she let her guard down, I was going to tear her world apart. I needed proof first. Hard evidence. I wasn't going to walk into this blind, so I hired a private investigator. The guy came recommended from someone at work, someone who had been through a nasty divorce and walked away with everything because he had the right leverage. His name was Carter. Quiet, professional, efficient. The kind of guy who didn't ask questions as long as you paid him well. We met at a small diner on the edge of town. It was the kind of place no one paid attention to, just a stop for truckers and exhausted office workers who didn't want to go home yet. Carter took a sip of his coffee, watching me carefully. You sure you want to do this? I wouldn't be here if I wasn't, I said. He nodded, sliding a notepad out of his jacket. I'll need details. Her schedule, the places she frequents, anything that seems off. I gave him everything. The fake meetings, the late nights, the unexplained expenses. I even told him about the Chicago flight ticket I had found. Carter listened without interruption, jotting things down in shorthand. All right, he said after a while. Give me a week. I didn't have to wait that long. 3 days later, I got a call. Your wife is meeting 2 different men, Carter said. I have photos, transaction records, and timestamps. My grip tightened around the phone. Tell me everything. The first guy? A senior executive at a hedge fund. Married. Wealthy. The kind of guy with a perfect family image that would shatter if anyone found out where he spent his nights. The second, a lawyer. Works at a firm specializing in high-profile divorces. The same firm Loren had casually mentioned when she talked about helping a friend. She wasn't just cheating. She was planning her exit. The pieces started falling into place. The secret savings account. The money transfers. The sudden coldness toward me. Like I had already become a problem she was working to get rid of. She was setting me up. I leaned back in my chair, exhaling slowly. "Send me everything," I said. Carter hesitated for a moment. "Look, I've seen this before. Women who want out of a marriage but don't want to leave empty-handed. Be careful, Brian. She's playing a game." A game. Yeah, but what she didn't know. She wasn't the only one playing anymore. She had made her move. Now it was my turn. Loren thought she was in control. That was her second mistake. The first had been betraying me. The second was thinking I wouldn't fight back. I let her believe I was broken. Let her think I was some pathetic, heartbroken husband who would quietly fade into the background while she built a new life behind my back. Every time she walked past me with that smug little smirk, every time she left the house without an excuse, every time she sent a text and tilted her phone away, just enough to make sure I didn't see it, I let her think she was winning. She had no idea what was coming. The moment Carter handed me the files, I knew exactly what my first move was going to be. Her lawyer boyfriend? The one she had been sneaking around with for weeks? He had a history. Carter had dug up a fraud case from years ago, one that had somehow been buried before it ever saw trial. No conviction, no official record, just whispers of a deal made behind closed doors. It was the kind of thing that, if brought back into the light, could end a career. And now it was going to. I spent the next few hours carefully crafting an anonymous email. No links to me, no way to trace it back. The documents attached spoke for themselves. I sent them directly to his firm's ethics committee, then copied in a few investigative journalists for good measure. And then I waited. It didn't take long. The next morning, Loren was acting different. The usual arrogance in her posture was gone. She kept glancing at her phone, frowning at whatever messages she was getting. She barely spoke over breakfast, her movements stiff, distracted. "Everything okay?" I asked, sipping my coffee. She didn't look up. "Yeah, just work stuff." Lies. I pulled out my own phone, checking the news alerts. There it was. A short article, barely more than a few paragraphs, but enough to start the fire. High-profile attorney under internal investigation for past financial misconduct. I took a slow sip of coffee, hiding my satisfaction. By the time I got home that evening, Loren was worse. I found her pacing the kitchen, phone pressed to her ear, voice sharp with frustration. "I don't know how they found out," she was saying, practically hissing into the phone. "No, I haven't talked to anyone. Of course I'm being careful." She turned and saw me standing there. Her face barely changed, but I caught it, the flicker of something in her eyes. Panic. She ended the call quickly, setting her phone down with forced casualness. "Who was that?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "Just a friend," she said too fast. "Nothing important." I stepped forward, watching her carefully. "You sure?" Her fingers twitched slightly where they rested against the counter. "Yeah," she said, forcing a small smile. "Why wouldn't I be?" "Because your entire world is starting to fall apart, Loren." I shrugged, giving her the same easy smile she had given me so many times before. "No reason." She nodded, but she didn't move. Didn't relax. I let the silence stretch between us, let her feel the weight of it. Then I turned and left the room. Because this was just the beginning. Loren was unraveling. I saw in the way she moved, stiff, tense, constantly on edge. She barely ate. She barely slept. She flinched when her phone rang and gripped it too tightly when she answered. She thought she was being discreet, but I noticed the way her hands trembled when she poured herself a drink, the way her jaw clenched just a little too hard when she thought no one was looking. Her world was falling apart. And the best part? She had no idea why. The first domino had already fallen. Her lawyer boyfriend had been suspended, his firm launching an internal investigation into his past fraud allegations. He was scrambling, desperately trying to contain the damage, trying to figure out who had come after him. But that was only step one. Now, it was time for number two. Lauren's second affair, the one with the hedge fund executive, was even riskier. Carter had found plenty on him. Fake investment deals, unreported offshore accounts, money laundering allegations that had been buried under a pile of corporate loopholes. All I had to do was bring them back to the surface. It took one email, one anonymous tip to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Within 48 hours, the investigation was public. His name was in the headlines. The kind of scandal that destroys careers, ruins reputations, and sends people to prison. I kept an eye on Lorraine the entire day, watching her crumble in real time. She paced the kitchen, her phone glued to her ear, whispering in frantic tones. She left for an urgent meeting and came back looking even worse. She poured herself a drink the second she walked through the door, then another. And then, for the first time in weeks, she turned to me. "Brian," she said, her voice tight. "Do you ever feel like everything's just slipping out of control?" I leaned against the counter, watching her carefully. "No," I said, keeping my voice calm. "Can't say that I do." She studied me, eyes flicking over my face like she was searching for something. She was trying to figure out if I knew. So I gave her something to think about. I stepped closer, just enough to let her feel my presence, just enough for her to see the smallest hint of a smirk at the corner of my lips. "You should be more careful about who you trust, Lorraine." Her breath hitched. Her fingers tightened around the glass. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. I could see it in her eyes. For the first time since this all started, she was afraid of me. She didn't finish her drink. She placed the glass down slowly, carefully, like she was suddenly hyper-aware of her movements. Then, without another word, she walked out of the kitchen. I listened as she went upstairs, her footsteps quick and uneven. A few minutes later, I heard her bedroom door close, then lock. I smiled. She thought a locked door would keep her safe. She still didn't understand. This wasn't a game anymore. I wasn't going to stop until she had nothing left. Lorraine had nothing left. The woman who once strutted through life with an air of untouchable confidence now sat at the dining table, staring blankly at a glass of wine she hadn't even sipped. Her perfectly styled hair was a mess. Her nails, once meticulously polished, were chipped and uneven. The carefully crafted image she had spent years building was gone. And for the first time, she knew it. She had spent the last 48 hours making frantic phone calls, trying to put out fires that refused to die. Her first lover was ruined. His wife had thrown him out, filed for divorce, and was coming after his entire fortune. His company was already considering cutting ties to avoid the scandal. Her second lover was even worse off. The fraud case I had exposed had spiraled out of control. The IRS and SEC were both involved now, and his frozen assets meant he couldn't even hire the lawyers he needed. I had checked the news that morning. His name was being dragged through the mud. And now? Now it was Lauren's turn. I waited. I watched as she received the final blow. Her phone buzzed with an incoming email, and I saw her eyes widen as she read it. I already knew what it said. The board of her charity had officially removed her from her own foundation. She had been locked out of the accounts, cut off from funding, and an internal audit had been launched into her financial records. Sponsors were fleeing. Donations were being withdrawn. Lorraine wasn't just losing her reputation. She was losing everything. I took a slow sip of coffee, savoring the silence. "You look tense," I said casually. She finally tore her gaze away from the phone, staring at me with something new in her eyes. Not arrogance, not smug amusement. Fear. "You did this," she whispered. Her voice was hoarse, like she had been screaming all day. I set my coffee down, tilting my head slightly. "No, Lorraine, you did this to yourself." Her fingers dug into the table as she leaned forward. "How long?" I raised an eyebrow. "How long what? How long have you known?" I let a small smirk tug at my lips. "Long enough." Her nostrils flared, and for a second, I thought she might throw something. But she didn't. She knew it wouldn't matter. Her world was already in ruins. She shot up from her chair, the force knocking it over. You ruined me." I took my time standing up, adjusted my shirt cuffs, met her gaze without a single ounce of hesitation. "No, Lorraine, you ruined yourself. I just made sure everyone saw it." Her lips trembled. Her body shook. And then, her voice changed. "Brian," she said softly, almost pleading, "I know I hurt you. I made mistakes. But we don't have to end like this." She was desperate. She knew she had nothing left. I chuckled under my breath. And I repeated, Loren, this ended the moment you decided to betray me. She swallowed hard. You never loved me, did you? I stepped closer, lowering my voice so that when I spoke, she felt every word. I loved the woman you pretended to be. Her face crumpled. She took a step back, like she was physically recoiling from my words. I watched as her hands clenched into fists, then loosened again, like she didn't know whether to fight or collapse. I grabbed my keys. Where are you going? She asked, her voice suddenly small, like a lost child in a crowd. I didn't answer. I just smiled one last time and walked out the door. Behind me, Loren made a sound, something between a gasp and a sob. She had lost everything, and I had won.